Hi, do you know what these stringing tools are or how they're helpful when stringing a racket? Or maybe you do and you want to learn how they perform when compared to each other. In this video, I'll start off by discussing the similarities of a starting block and the offset tube. Alright, so let's first talk about the purpose of a starting block or an offset tube. I'll use the starting block as an example. But basically what you're trying to do with this is to create a space between the frame and the starting clamp, and you're trying to get it to be placed farther away from the frame. And the reason for that is to help reduce the chance of premature breakage, especially if you mishit the ball in that section. Because what happens if you're using a starting clamp on the string, especially if you place it right up to the frame itself. So I have the starting clamp right here, and I marked it so that you can see it with this mark right here. But let's say you tensioned it and you're ready to put the string into the next hole, and you're going to run it up this way. This section of the string where I placed the starting clamp is right in that bend, in that grommet. You can't even see the section of the string that I marked because it's hidden by where it's going into the next hole. And that area can sometimes cause the premature breakage when you mishit there, because there are some starting clamps that are, especially the cheaper ones, that can tend to deform the string more than something like this. This is a Babolat starting clamp, which goes for about $75. This Yonex or Kimoni starting clamp goes for $250, but you don't need something as expensive as this. I would highly recommend Babolat though, because at $75, it does deform the string less. There are starting clamps that start from $36, but again, if you watch, I have two videos that I featured different starting clamps, and you can see what happens to the strings when you use a cheaper starting clamp and what it does to deform the string and ultimately cause weakness in that area. All right, so before I get into the three situations when you'd use a starting block or an offset tube, I wanted to show you the four that I'll be testing in this video. So I have the Kimoni starting block here. And for each one, I also measured the distance that it would be relocating the clamp away from the frame. So you can see that this is the smallest of the four that I have here. And the distance on this one is 5/8 of an inch. The next we have, I have these two, but this one here is made by David Hall from Racquet Sports Services down in the UK. And David sent me these for me to try out. So thanks again, David. And this one is at 1 inch. Then we have this one, which is the offset tube. And this one was made by John Google, and he's down in Orlando, Florida, Racquet Quest. And this one is 2 inches. And finally, we have this another one by David Hall here. And this one is at 2.5 inches. So again, this is the distance that the starting clamp will be placed away from the frame once it's being used. All right, so here's the first situation when you would use a starting block or an offset tube. It's when you're starting your mains using the Yusuke method. So for this method, you're going to be pulling the first two mains at the same time. And basically with this method, you're trying to get the strings with some tension so that it's easier for you to just lift up the clamp to the string without having to hold it in position if you start your mains that way. So I have some tension here, and we'll start off with the Kimoni. So it's going to be placed on the outside of the frame, and you can see the mark here where the starting clamp is going to be positioned right there. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and release tension here. And then eventually what's going to happen is you're going to be putting tension, full tension on this other side right there. And then when you come back to this side here, I'm going to put full tension here. Then you can move your string clamp over. And for demonstration purposes, this is not in the ideal position, but I'm going to leave it here. But mainly what's important is when you remove the starting clamp and the starting block, let's take a look at where that mark is in relation to the grommet. So we're going to bring this next string in through here. and you can see the mark right there. And so now the mark is right outside of that grommet barrel. So if we take a look at the starting clamp in relation to that mark, part of it is still inside that grommet. So in my opinion, using a starting block like this, where it's only about 5/8, 7" outside of the frame, is a little bit too close to the frame. I feel like if you mishit the ball, this is still a weak area of the string. And typically when the weak part of the string is right near the grommet and you mishit the ball, that's what causes the breakage of the string. And even if the string was healthy without any deformity, it can still break with a bit when you shank the ball. So in my opinion, this would be a little bit too close. So we're going to take a look at the other starting blocks and the offset tube to see where the clamp mark is in relation to the grommet. All right, so here's David Hall's starting block, the 1" version, the shorter one. So I already got it started here. I'm going to pull tension on this so I can remove both the starting clamp and the starting block and bring this clamp over. So now let's take a look at where the mark is in relation to the grommet when we run this next string through here. And all right, so now you can see that the mark is right there, and there's about 1/4 inch right there. So I like that because it's at least it's away from the grommet, and having it here is not as bad as having it inside the grommet. All right, so this offset tube is different from the other 3 starting blocks, where you can simply just because it has a slot right here, and you can just place it on top of the string at any point. With the offset tube, you have to plan ahead and make sure that you slip it through the end of the string before you start. So I'm going to go ahead and position this here, and hopefully I can get it so that the clamp will be right where the mark is. So I'm going to go ahead and make my pull, and I hope that the clamp will end up right where the mark is to give you an accurate indication of where it's going to end up. Okay, so I got the clamp right on top of that black mark. I'm going to go ahead and clamp here, release tension. All right, so we can remove the starting clamp and the offset tube. And again, you have to slip it all the way to the end of the string. And then we're going to run this string through and check out where that mark is, where the starting clamp was placed. And you can see that that's well inside of the frame. I mean, this is where it was clamped, and you got about, I would say about 1.25 inch space, so that's well inside. So again, this is good because it's away from the grommet. Now you have it kind of closer to the string bed though. So this is definitely better than the first starting block, but now it's a little bit further away. So between the short version of David Hall's and the offset tube, I think this distance is actually better. Actually, I just remembered that this particular starting block is designed for the crosses, so I'm not going to demonstrate it on starting the mains using the Yusuke method, because you can see how bulky or how much space this would take up here. I still would have room for my starting clamp, but luckily the throat of this racket has enough space, so it'll be pretty far back there, and of course it's going to end up further into the string bed because of the distance that it is away from the frame. So I like the distance of this starting block, where it was about 1 inch away from the frame. All right, so next we're going to take a look at the second application. For the second situation where you'll be using a starting block or an offset tube is when you start the crosses. And I prefer to start the crosses using the starting block or a offset tube for the reason that you can actually get more even tension on the top and bottom cross. And I recently did a video where I mentioned that the reason for that is because you're actually tying off both the top and the bottom. If you use a starting knot and tie it and secure it onto the anchor string, you're pulling full reference tension on that top cross. So that the top cross will be definitely tighter than the bottom where you tie off, and there'll be a little bit of loss of tension. The other reason why I don't prefer to use the starting knot technique is that it does place some stress on the anchor string. I mean, there is a starting knot that you should use that will reduce that, but I would say it's safer to just go ahead and tie both the top and bottom, and again, using either a starting block or offset tube. So for demonstration purposes, there's no tension on this string, but what I wanted to do is make sure that I place, in this case, this first one, the kimoni, right in the position there where you can see that there's the mark there, because that's where the clamp is going to go. And I'll use my my Yonex starting clamp for this, but it's the same width, so it'll go right there. And let's say you tension the string there, and now you're removing it, so you're going to take off your starting clamp and the starting block. Now this is the natural tie off hole here, so let's say if I go up here and I'm going to tie off, you can see already that this mark right here, it's starting to fade, but it's right there. It's on part of the outside of the frame, and it's hidden by the grommet right here. So if you tie off where that clamp was used, that's definitely going to be a weak spot in that area. But let's say if you created a tie-off hole that was right next to the string, the first cross. So even for this one right here, if I put it in here, there's a mark right there, and there's the mark. It's right, yeah, it's sticking out right here. So part of it is in the grommet and part of it is sticking out. But again, I'm going to be tying off a knot right here using that area where I was using the starting clamp. All right, so the second starting block is David Hall's shorter starting block. And although I know that this is meant for the mains, we'll just take a look at where the mark is, where the starting clamp was placed. So I'll go ahead and take these two off. And we're just going to go with the natural tie-off hole here. And so you can see that, well, about half of where the clamp was placed is sticking out of the grommet, and the other half is inside of that barrel. So again, if I tie off with this section of the string, it is a weaker part of the string. Even though you use a good quality starting clamp, I would say that it would be better if you could eliminate having to tie off with that portion of the string. All right, so let's take a look at the offset tube. I'll go ahead and remove the starting clamp, offset tube. So you can see the mark here. Again, this is about 2 inches away from the frame. So let's say if we used the natural tie-off hole and we went in here. So there is about 3/8 of an inch gap right there. So that might be just enough to actually tie off a knot. But let's see if we went to the hole that was right next, and for sure there's going to be more room. But I would say that this would actually be a better location for the knot, just to make sure that we're not going to use any part of that portion of the string that was used to clamp the that was clamping the string. So yeah, now you have about a full inch right there. There's a distance there. So with the offset tube, I would say that this string run right here, which was about 1 inch and maybe 1/8 of an inch, was cutting it close with the knot. But with a tie-off knot that's closer to the last string coming out, this would be a safe way to tie off. Finally, we have David Hall's long starting block. Again, this is a 2.5 inch distance from the frame. We'll go to the natural tie-off hole. And so now we have a full inch. So that's definitely enough room for me to tie off a knot here. So I'll just go ahead and check it out and see where the clamp mark ends up after I tie off here. So I'm going to go ahead and, yeah, so there's still space. And yeah, it might be hard for you to see, but that clamp mark is right, it's right outside of the knot tail. So when I trim the knot right here, I normally would release the clamp first, but let's say this is where the clamp mark was. So part of it is on the knot tail and maybe the part of the second loop, but I would say this is a lot safer in terms of the distance when placing the starting clamp, for the fact that the knot will not be, this part of the string will not be used to form the knot. And this third situation is when you're using the around the world pattern. So typically you're going to come to a point in the racket where you need to use a starting clamp on the outside of the frame to free up the clamp so you can install a couple of crosses. So what I'm going to do here is pull tension on this last mean, and I'm going to test out the kimoni first. So you're going to go ahead and place it here, and what I'm going to do is actually mark the string. So I'm going to go ahead and do this as quickly as I can. So I'm going to mark it there, and then I'm going to place the starting clamp here, and then mark it on the outside too, so that I can see when I run the string over to the cross on the bottom where those two marks end up. So I'm going to go ahead and let's say I already finished the top two crosses, so I'm going to come down here. I'm going to pull this to remove that. All right, so there's the two marks right here, and that's where the clamp was placed. So I'm going to run the second cross on the bottom. I'm not going to bother to weave it. I'm just going to pull it through so we can just see where that mark is. And right now the mark is right. Yeah, so the clamp, the second mark is here, but the first mark is hidden by this grommet barrel. So it's right on that edge, and just the fact that it's right on that edge, again, it's too close to the grommet. If you miss hit the ball there, that's, you know, typically the ball is going to be almost like wedged right there. So it is going to possibly cause a break there. So I'm going to go ahead and test out the next clamp starting block. But I'm going to just mark it with a different color pen, so I can just go ahead and do this. And I'm going to place the starting block here. Actually, I got to mark it first. So we're going to go with red on this one. Right here. Place the clamp there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this. And you can see the red marks here. It's further away from the frame. And run this string through here. All right, so now I can see the two red marks. And if you can't see it, I'll just remark it so you can see where that is. There's one right there. And there's a second one right there. So there is a gap right there. I would say it's about 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16 of an inch. So I like the fact that it is pushed away from it. It is in the string bed, but that can't be helped. So let's take a look at the offset tube next. So again, with the offset tube, you have to run it through the end of the string until you get it to the area that you want to place it next to the frame. So I'm going to use black for this one. It's right actually on top of that red one, so I'm going to just mark over that. And there's the clamp. Here's the other side. There. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just remove this right here. Yeah, so you can see the difference right there. There's these two are the green one. The red one was right here. Now the black one is way back here. So let's run this. Yeah. All right, so there's the black ones right there. Well, I'll just clamp onto it, see? So it's right there. That's where the marks are. So You can see that this is even further in, of course, because of the fact that it's, 2 inches. But again, I like the fact that it's away from the grommet. So I think either the offset tube or David's short starting block would do the job. But if I were to pick one of these for the around the world, I think the starting block, this shorter one, is good because for one thing, it's easy to just remove when you need to take it off. You don't need to run it through the entire string length. And it's safe enough to be away from the grommet to be less risk of premature breakage. I'd like to thank David Hall for sending me his 2 starting blocks. And I got these a couple of days ago. I tried to reach him but haven't heard back. And I'm not sure if he sells these. He's located in the UK. He's a colleague and a global ambassador for IART. And I'll leave a link to his website at Racquet Sports Services. Now, even if he doesn't sell these starting blocks, in this video, I found that the 2.5-inch starting block worked really well for starting the crosses to allow the knot to be tied without having that section of the string that was clamped down by the starting clamp. And for starting the mains with the Yusuke method, this 1-inch starting block worked really well. It also worked well for the around the world pattern. In summary, when using a starting clamp on the outside of the frame, it's essential to have a good quality starting clamp. However, if you want to be on the safe side, starting off with a starting block or an offset tube could make a difference in producing a quality string job from start to finish. Thanks for watching, happy stringing, and let your strings play.